Hi, everyone. Thanks for staying on. And for those of you who have just come here, we are discussing water, as Anne said, and we've got today 30 minutes to discuss clean water access in the region. And we've got a really esteemed panel of very, very experienced and passionate professionals who work in this space here today. But before that, just a quick reminder that we have a QR code there. Please scan it. It'll take you to our Mentimeter page to key in your questions, which we will address towards the end of this discussion. We have 30 minutes, 3 speakers with loads of experience, so we're going to get right to it. Sitting right beside me is Christie, who works at CPO, and today she will be talking about how Singapore collaborates with the rest of Southeast Asia. Gay, thank you for coming all the way from Philippines for us. Gay is the regional head for water.org, which he will talk about shortly. And online with us is Romain, who we will bring up on screen in a minute. So while we're setting the screen up, Christie, could you give us a short introduction of what you do at CPO and what CPO does in this space, please? Thank you.
Sure, thanks, Maya. Maybe a quick introduction about my organization. I'm part of the Singapore International Foundation, SIF for short. We are a non-profit based in Singapore, and we try and catalyze and build ecosystems for collective action and for a better world. We look at convening different people from the sectors. I think in the earlier panel, they talked about how collaboration is much needed. So we bring together people from the PPP, private, public, philanthropic sectors for collective action. Our focus areas are in education, in digital, in health, in youth development and leadership, and of course climate. And actually CPO is our latest climate initiative. It actually stands for Southeast Asia Partnership for Adaptation Through Water. And we just recently launched this initiative on the sidelines of Singapore International Water Week in June. Our strategic partner is the World Economic Forum. And what we are looking to do is to bring together different partners in this space to move forward on the adaptation front. Happy to share more about CPO later.
You sound like you have a very busy schedule, dealing with so much going on with CIF and CPO. And I believe you just come back from COP as well?
Actually, I have colleagues there now. We just convened a session on Food and Water Day 2 days ago. So we are doing the multiple approach.
Wonderful.
AlterCOP in Singapore and COP in Baku
Wonderful.
as well.
And this is kudos to you and the team who've organized AlterCOP. Gay, if you don't mind just introducing yourself and water.org, which is not without its glamour with Matt Damon and all at the helm of it. Thanks.
Yes, hi, good afternoon, everyone. Grateful to be here, Anne. That being said, so water.org was co-founded by 2 gentlemen, Matt Damon, the Hollywood actor, and Gary White, who's an engineer. We talked about the challenges earlier in water, but at the end of the day, I mean, you cannot address those challenges without the critical financial resource. So at water.org, we're about mobilizing the financing, the capital across the ecosystem from the household level to the missing middle. When I say missing middle, those that have a touch point on the supply chain of water and sanitation. We also work with the utilities, the service providers. So through our technical assistance, we are able to help the financial institutions adopt a loan product dedicated to water and sanitation so that the lower income families will have access to water and sanitation. We don't believe that people living in poverty is a problem to be solved, but rather a market to be served. It's about sustainability. So these are affordable microloans that we are able to structure and market together with the financial institutions partner. So as regards to the missing middle, like any SMEs in the supply chain of water and sanitation, they're challenged to access funding because they don't have, I mean, the default of financial institutions is hard collateral. Do you have the land to put as collateral? These are small enterprises that have accounting books run as a mom and pop shop. It's not in order. Operational efficiencies are low. So our technical assistance is about helping them increase their operational efficiencies, as well improve their accounting systems, so they'll be more bankable and attractive to financial institutions and investors. So once they're bankable and we work through our technical assistance, we connect them to our network of financial institutions. And lastly, for the big water utilities and the small ones, it's critical to help them. Because if you look at for example, Philippines and Indonesia, it's archipelagic. At the end of the day, it's a business proposition for the water utilities. They will serve the areas that's most populated. But what about the other islands? It cannot be one size fits all. So we really work with them to reach the last mile.
A massive challenge, right? Because there's water everywhere, but the clean water access, which can make a huge difference to people who could be, get out of poverty and get on with their life. It's very empowering what you do. And before we go more into depth of, the work that you do, I want to draw attention to a very large person on the screen behind us. Hi, Romain. Hi, thanks for dialing in from Vietnam.
Thank you very much for having me. I can see I occupy a big space in the
Yeah.
stage. Sorry about that.
Where should I look while talking to Romain? Okay. So Romain, we'll pretend you're at the back of a room, actually. And could you give us a short introduction of what you do as a CEO of 1001 Fontaines? Yeah, thanks. In Vietnam. And as Gay had just mentioned, there's a lot of localization. And I think you've done this at Cambodia and now moved over to Vietnam. So could you give us a brief preview of that?
Yes, sure, definitely. I was hearing Marcus concluding the other session and saying how much water is a local topic, and I think it's something we can very much relate to at 1001 Fontaines. So we are a social enterprise created in France 20 years ago. We don't have founders as famous as Madhusoodan, unfortunately. Our founders are former, let's say, corporate people who were convinced that access to safe drinking water is not a matter of technology, but more a matter of operating model and having the right scheme in place with the right incentives for the right people. And so we started this journey 20 years ago, and today we are basically, our job is to design and deploy solutions at scale to provide a safe drinking water solution for a vulnerable population. And we do that in a financially self-sustainable way. So we are really convinced that as a social enterprise, our job is not only to provide access to safe drinking water at a certain point of time, but make sure that this access can be lasting. And for this, you need to have somehow a way to cover basically at least your basic operational costs. So we started our journey 20 years ago in Cambodia. Today in Cambodia, we are basically the largest safe drinking water provider in rural areas, where is our main focus. The way we operate in Cambodia, to explain it quite simply, we install what we call water kiosks. They are small-scale infrastructures, something like 60 square meters, that we basically implement on the land that is provided by the commune. And the commune gives us access to the water source that is locally available. It's usually a pond or a river, sometimes it's a shallow well. And then basically most of our job is not in the infrastructure, but it's more in the operations. And so our job is to recruit a local entrepreneur from the community who was very often a farmer before that. And we basically train them to become a water entrepreneur. And then we entrust them the management of the water kiosk on a daily basis. And their role is basically to fill 20-liter water bottles with clean water, because we have like a local, very simple treatment system in-house in the facility. And most importantly, to deliver it to the households with basically 20-liter water bottles, which is quite common now in most countries. But when we started in Cambodia 20 years ago, we were the first ones to introduce this service. And this convenience and the home delivery and the last mile that we were just mentioning is really essential for us to ensure the adoption of the service. And one last thing to mention is that so today we have like 350 water kiosks all across Cambodia in rural areas. We have more than 1 million people drinking the water on a daily basis, And we are doing that, I mean, with break-even on the operational expenditures. All the investment is covered by philanthropy, people like water.org or other funders that have been supporting us over the years. But all the OPEX are basically self-funded with the water sales. So we demonstrated that even though we're targeting low-income people, they still have a willingness to pay that is sufficient to basically balance the operational cost, which is really essential for us in what we do. And maybe just one last word before moving on. We are present in Cambodia, but also in Vietnam, in Madagascar, and in Bangladesh. And each time it has been kind of a journey, you know, to adjust the model and to localize it, to understand the local dynamics regarding water, and to fine-tune the operating model to make it actually work in the field in the different countries. There is no one-size-fits-all, and there is no copy-paste in what we do. It's quite tailored, actually.
Well, thanks for mentioning that, because listening to your introductions, firstly, it's extremely complex and challenging. There's a lot of collaboration and there's a lot of local context. And the local context is not just a cultural one, it's that of infrastructure, it's the local supply of water, water availability, and then the operationalization of it, like you said. Romain, you work with people to help them become water entrepreneurs, and you said you work with existing mid-level entrepreneurs to help them with their water access, right? I think it's really interesting to think about the amount of local context and the intricacies of the local context that you might have to address, because I'm sure these are not governments with a very well-established PUB in the countries. So maybe could you talk to us about some of the intricacies, the local context that you have to kind of overcome?
That can be attributed to, first, the physical infrastructure. I mean, it's not the same for every country. It's not the same for every islands within each country. So you really have to contextualize the solution. And end of the day, it has to be something that's cost effective and affordable to reach the last mile. Another source of challenge is governance in itself. I mean, who's overseeing? I mean, you have one entity, I assume, for Singapore. For a good number of countries we oversee, you have like probably 30 agencies, for example, in the Philippines, overseeing water. And I mean, how do you have a cohesive one vision and one vision, one direction? So it's not only true for the Philippines, it's also true for other emerging market countries. So I think those are the two main things. And of course, third to that, which is the critical role that we're playing, is the access to financial resources. Government cannot do it alone. You have 114 billion financing gap for SDG 6. And a very minimal amount of investments per year. Then again, I mean, if you talk about that, I mean, SDG as a whole, look at the financing gap, it's 1% of the global wealth. Then how come it's not? It's supposed to be a simple math, right?
Yeah.
It's not happening.
It's staggering. I think it's just taking me 2-3 seconds to just process that. But I wanted to ask you how, with SIF and CIPO as the organization that deals with water, how do you interact, or what are the challenges that you have to face when it comes to, you know, dealing with local context, not just one agency, but like so many?
I want to echo Gay's, kind of question, right, about why there's this big financing gap, and yet there's a lot of, finance going around, whether it's the philanthropic sector, the investment sort of groups and things like that. And that's also why we decided as SIF, the forum, and CIPO to focus on adaptation, because actually, even though the climate financing gap is that large, the adaptation gap is even larger, because a lot of the focus now is going on mitigation for countries to meet their NDCs, their net zero goals. So adaptation for us was really the reason why, or rather focusing on climate adaptation and through the water lens, because water actually underpins most of the SDGs. In fact, I think 80-90% of climate challenges, your floods, your droughts, are all related to waters. And it's not just the communities, right, that are facing the risk, businesses as well. In the earlier panel, PUB talked about water resource management. CIPO is quite an interesting, I would say, collective of stakeholders. The reason why we decided to bring the different parties together is exactly to the earlier panel's point. Different sectors are interested in different things. So we have as members, it's a membership platform, CPOR, we have as members MNCs that are looking at how to better manage their resources, water resources, because they're in a high water usage industry. They might be bigger, larger corporates who already have their own R&D specialists and technical support, and they might not be looking at solutions, but they want a kind of consolidated voice to maybe speak to policy and policymakers and government. And then we have, for instance, the challenge with access to clean water in rural communities. So the different stakeholders are really quite different. And the reason why we decided to bring all these actors together, I mean, there are many, many organizations doing good work in the sector, but why is it that we aren't furthering the solutioning? I mean, solutions are out there. It's just that water solutions maybe tend to be a bit expensive, difficult to implement, or complicated. So if we can bring together the right actors to, I guess, create a larger narrative and to push for that additional climate financing to go in, for the philanthropic sector to de-risk the first part of the proof of concept or pilots, then that's where we hope that at the end of the day, more financing will come in for some of these solutions. So with regard to dealing, I guess, with a complicated set of stakeholders, I think for us, we realize that government support is critical. I mean, you don't want to go into a country and kind of pilot or implement a project without that sort of government support or endorsement. And I don't just mean from a financial perspective, because that's just one element. But if they do not support or endorse some of these larger scale water solutions, then you never know when they might shut down your project as well. And that's not what we want at all. So we do try and engage all the different parties, including government regulators, the utilities, as well as, the compliance folks as well.
So it's a very fragile balance of making sure that you're getting the funding, the work is moving forward, you're showing the impact, and then you're kind of furthering that to... I believe sorry to stop you, but we are running against time. I think we have 5 minutes before we get into Q&A. I just want to ask Romain one question on the topic that both of you brought up of scale. And this is something that you've experienced, especially starting small in Cambodia and kind of figuring out the system there and moving on to where you are right now, but your organization has experience in a lot more emerging countries. How do you tackle the scalability aspect, Romain?
Well, that's the question that our board is asking us every day, right? Once you demonstrated that something works, once you really did the proof of concept as we did in Cambodia at scale, like 1 million beneficiaries, 350 water kiosks, and break-even OPEX, it's a demonstration. And now we have big pressure from, our donors, from the board, from the team to scale it. And to scale it in new geographies and to, raise more money and to go faster. And actually, we as the management team are facing the reality of the challenges to adjust this model in new geographies. And just to give you a very concrete example, in Madagascar, where we have been for the past 15 years, in the beginning, we did a copy-paste of the model in Cambodia. And the idea was really to replicate what we did with rural water kiosk, at scale in rural communes of Madagascar. And we tested that for nearly 8 years, and we really did to the bottom of it, and it didn't work. And so either we just have quit and we say, okay, it's not working, and scale is not possible in Madagascar, or you find another way to make scale happen, which we did in Madagascar. So instead of focusing exclusively on rural areas, we've also turned to urban, where we saw that needs were still very high despite the availability of pipe water, because obviously density is much higher in urban settings. And so we pivoted like 4 years ago in Madagascar, and we created a small factory in the suburbs of the second city of the country called Tamatave. And now, we are not at full scale yet, but we found the right model that is really fitting the local context in Madagascar. And now we're going to be in a scale of in a phase of ramping up. But there is no such thing as, easy copy-paste scale in a new geography. It really takes time to adjust the model, make sure it works, and somehow the PNL is the judge of this. If your PNL is working, you get traction from the end users and everything, then you feel you have something. But that should be one of the drivers, right? Like the bottom line. And so, yeah, we are doing a lot of effort into adjusting our model to fit local context, to be honest.
Christie, can I ask you a question that deviates from the current topic, but is something that came up during our discussion earlier? As we know, we are getting into quite a bit of extreme weather changes and climate, extreme drought, extreme floods, and this affects food and farming. Could you talk to us about the intersection of water and farming, just so we understand the extent to which,
Yes,
water supply?
we had an interesting conversation about this. So, not many people know, but rice farming actually contributes to 10% of the global emissions from methane. And in Southeast Asia, because rice farming is really the predominant sort of agriculture commodity, for rice farming in Asia, it's about 25 to 33% of methane emissions. This methane is actually produced because of the traditional flooding methods that is being used in rice farming. So if there is a way to reduce the duration of the rice paddies being flooded, a way to introduce more sustainable irrigation approaches, we can actually reduce the methane emissions, but at the same time help farmers become more climate resilient, right? Because as you rightly pointed out, sometimes it's too much water, sometimes it's too little water. So they are facing lots of challenges in terms of their agriculture output, crops, yield, that sort of thing. We have a sustainable rice farming project that we're trying to roll out and implement in Southeast Asia, and this takes into account sustainable approaches like irrigation, soil management, and we are hoping that this, of course, not just helps them to improve their yield, reduce their resource usage, water usage, fertilizer usage, but with the decrease in that methane emissions, there could be a protocol, or there is rather a protocol to certify and actually obtain carbon credits. And this actually allows them an additional revenue stream. So it's an intersection, of course, of water, which is critical in agriculture, as well as climate, improving livelihoods, smallholder farmers, that sort of thing. Yeah.
Fascinating, and I think the more we get into this discussion, the implications of water to every bit of our lives is quite clear. We have less than 5 minutes left. I was waiting for some questions to come through on Mentimeter, but there are none. But is anyone here? Does anyone have a question? Yes, sir.
Thank you. Hi, can I ask the panel whether you have come across a situation where in a land where you don't have pipe water, and when you go down and you want to implement the piping and the distribution of water, has there been cases of people asking you to pay for the raw water? And how do you handle it? The raw water.
You mean
let's
like
say
from the...
Waters from the source, right? Whether it's from well, from river, or from ocean. Has anybody come to you and say, sorry, you have to pay for this source of water? That's the first instance, and then how do you handle that? Thank you. Whether it's land or maybe... Yeah. Has there been such cases? Because we don't have that kind of situation in Singapore, I guess. Thank you.
Not in the business model that we have, because we're more of like facilitating, financing, reaching the last mile. It's more of mostly we work with rural areas, and their default is like to rely on water from the well. And part of our technical assistance is the demand generation for them to shift their mindset from a free source, not sustainable source of water, and to a pipe water. So we have not experienced that. It's the experience we have is more of shifting the mindset from resorting to water from the well to pipe water.
Yeah. I think similarly, we also just announced at COP that we are going into a new access to clean water community for East Malaysia. Like Gay mentioned, I think their traditional source is the rivers as well as groundwater. there has been no mention of having to pay any of the utilities or the government for this water, but saying that this particular project has the support from the government. And to her point, there is no piped water access at that moment, at this moment, I mean. So not that I know of that there is this indication of having to pay for the water source.
That is a really interesting question. Thanks for asking, Romain. Do you have any experience with, people that you work with in the local context addressing the rights to their water?
Everywhere we've been working, we didn't have such case of having to pay for the raw water. However, what we have in Cambodia, for example, is that, obviously the water patterns are changing with climate change. And in 2018, we had a massive drought in Cambodia. And so some of the primary water sources of the water kiosk have been drying up. And so in that case, we had, because we are like, let's say, quite decentralized in our approach, we had the ability to switch water source and to, go to another locally available water source. But it didn't result in any payment from the community, to the community or to the local government. It never happened. But sometimes we really see the pressure on a daily basis on the resource. And we see the conflict of usage also between agriculture and just basic water for water supply. So we see it on a daily basis in the communes, but until now there is no really price or cost associated to the raw water itself.
Actually, sorry, maybe I can just make it. Actually, that is essentially the problem, right? Because the value of water is not yet, we are not pricing it correctly, and that's exactly what the Global Commission Economic of Water report has put out, that we are not valuing pricing, the governance is not there, and so people take it as a free resource, and that's why they're indiscriminately kind of using water to a certain extent. So I would think for what you're sharing, it would largely be in basins where there are already systems there, where there is a water right or water equity or water justice element. For instance, in the US or in Australia, there are such basins where there are water credits, loosely put it, exchanges where there is a value or monetary sort of item placed on volume of water. But I think in rural communities, this is too complex a system. I'm not sure whether there are rural communities out there that are being charged.
One more question, thank you.
Following up on that, I wanted to share that the water credits can work in sanitation, because we have just proved in a project in Java that a family on safe sanitation is worth 200 cubic meter a year. And that is, if Microsoft gets its way, that's $50 US per year. And that's for the next 20 years. So sanitation is going to be worth money, also in the villages.
We're going to end on that positive note, because thank you for that comment. We're at time, but thank you so much to the speakers and present here in real life and virtual.